Hey, welcome back. So today we are doing a video on milk steaming. This is highly coveted. Everybody asks for a milk steaming. It's a steam along, sing along. It's actually not going to be a sing along. You don't want to hear me sing. Anyway, let's go. So what is milk or cow juice? Well, milk is actually three things. Well, it's actually four things if you're counting the water, which you should because it's mostly water. But the three main components of milk that we'll be talking about are going to be proteins, fats and lipids, and lactose, which is sugar. It's also the thing that people are allergic to whenever they are lactose intolerant. Their bodies don't produce enough lactase to break down lactose. So then they get really sick and they can't digest the milk. Milk also contains minerals, but we're not really talking about that today, so we're just gonna skip over that one entirely. I don't really think you need to learn milk science to steam milk, but I wanna go over some of the reasons why you wanna pick certain types of milk. And that goes back to some of the science talk that we're talking about proteins and fat. So whenever we steam milk, we're actually doing a couple things. We're heating up that milk. We're also increasing the perceived sweetness of that milk by breaking down large sugars into smaller, more perceivable sugars. We're also adding air to that milk. That's the important part because when we add air, we create foam. These two processes actually work together in forming the foam that we need for latte art and for cappuccinos. If you would try to foam cold milk, the foam would not be as stable as if it were hot. So what's actually making the foam in your steamed milk is those proteins that we mentioned earlier. Without proteins, you won't have foam. So let's talk about those proteins very briefly. I want you to picture them as a coiled up ball, just this chain of proteins coiled up into a little ball. And on the outside of that ball is a hydrophilic side. Hydrophilic meaning it is attracted to water. And on the inside of that ball is a hydrophobic side. And as it's cold, it stays in this ball-shaped form, coiled up. But as it heats up, that ball starts to expand and starts to branch out, and that hydrophobic side comes out of the ball uncoiled. And it has to go somewhere. It's hydrophobic. It hates water. It hates water. So it's either going to grab onto the fat or it's going to grab onto the air that we have injected into our milk. But simultaneously with all of that, fat is actually a destabilizer to foam. So when you have fat in your milk, you have less foam. I think this is so cool. This is why 2% foams up a lot better. It's just the proteins. So it's able to create a really thick foam, and it has no fat in that foam that's going to destabilize and calm those bubbles down. Whereas with fat in your milk, you actually have to do more work to get more foam into that milk, and the foam is less stable overall, but you've increased your mouthfeel and you actually have something that is workable in latte art. This is also really interesting for alternative milks as well, because alternative milks have proteins, so they are able to make foam. And if you don't add some kind of oil or fat back into that milk, it's not going to create a velvety foam. It's going to be stiff, and people don't really want that. Two of my favorite alternative milks are Califia and Barista Series. Neither one of them sponsored this video, by the way. I just think they're great. I particularly like Califia oat milk. You should give it a shot. But now we know which milk not to use, right? So we're not going to use 2% or low-fat milk for our steaming. We're going to use either whole milk or we're going to use a really nice, stable alternative milk. Oat, from what I've seen, is usually the best for steaming and pouring latte art. Now the fun part. Now we can actually steam. So before we get into the steaming process, I'm going to show you what it looks like to walk up to a coffee bar and steam some milk. Here we go. Okay, so that wasn't that hard, right? In theory, it's not that hard. We're trying to induce a vortex or a whirlpool to distribute the air that we're injecting deeper into the pitcher, breaking down big bubbles into tinier bubbles, creating velvety, delicious microfoam. So I already made a video on what not to do during steaming. So if you want to check that out, you can click right here or right here, wherever it ends up being, or you can go to the description down below and I'll link the video there as well. But I have a couple rules for you I want you to follow. So I call this the purge sandwich. You want to do a purge at the very beginning of the process as well as the very end of the process. At the very beginning, you're going to walk up to the steam wand and you're going to turn on the steam wand with a towel over the steam wand to purge out any liquid that is inside of there. There's condensation. Water gets trapped up in there. That's a nice gesture to do on camera right there. Water gets trapped inside that steam wand, and then when you turn it on, if you haven't purged it, it's going to go into your milk and it's going to mess up the entire process. The next most important thing is placement. What you want to do is you want to start out by using the lip of the pitcher as a guide. We use the lip of the pitcher against the steam wand. That's where it's going to live. That's how it's rested. And then you're going to tilt to one side or the other. In between the wall and the middle. You do not want to be against the wall of the pitcher. You don't want to be in the middle because then you're not creating a beautiful vortex that we need. So the next step is going to be starting the actual steaming process. So you want to take the tip of the steam wand, the part where the holes are, and submerge that underneath the milk. The reason we go underneath the milk is if we turned it on above the milk, it would make a huge mess. There would be steam blasting all over the milk, throwing it all over your house or your kitchen or wherever you are, maybe your bedroom like me. That's not ideal. So we want to submerge that tip underneath the milk before we turn the steam wand on. How deep do you submerge that tip? You want to submerge it just so that the holes are underneath the milk. You don't want to go super far, not an inch up, like half an inch maybe at the most. The idea is that we want to get this air in as soon as possible during the steaming. And if we're searching for it, it's a little bit hard to actually get the air in soon. So starting out, I do encourage you to submerge fully and then pull it down until you hear the chirps that we're going to talk about in just a second. But if you're a little bit more advanced and you've been steaming milk for a while, just take into consideration that you want to get the air in as soon as possible. So searching for it is going to inhibit you just a little bit in your timeliness of injecting air. Right, we're in a good position. We're exactly where we want to be. Now we got to turn on the steam wand, and this is kind of the scary part. This is when all the air is going to inject, and this is also going to be when you need to be paying the most attention. Turn on that steam wand, and you're going to hear it make these sounds. It's going to go tss, 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 tss. I need you to be very gentle here. I like to say in steaming milk that less is more, and we want to get all the air in as soon as possible, but what we don't want to do is throw in large amounts of air that have giant bubbles and small bubbles the same mixed throughout unevenly. It's not going to create beautiful mouthfeel for our foam, and it's going to make it hard to pour with. So the key here is gentle injections of air, multiple injections of air as well. You don't want to do one big spurt. You want it to be more like tss. So there are two things that can happen. You can either add way too much air in the beginning, or you can add no air. And if you add no air, it's going to scream at you. If you botch your milk, there's nothing you can really do with it. You can save some milk, yeah, by transferring it into another pitcher and grooming it and tapping out those big bubbles, but it's still not quite the same as if you got it right the first time. So gentle injections of air at the very beginning. But how long do I inject air? Well, you're going to inject air until you've either reached your volume or you can feel the pitcher get warm. This means it's at about 100 degrees because our hand is at 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Once you do that, there is not enough time to add air to the milk and distribute it enough and break it down into delicate microfoam. So it's kind of pointless. Don't add any more air, and instead just focus on the air you have added and breaking that down into tinier bubbles with your vortex. Okay, so you're at the point where you've added enough air and it's time to stop injecting air. How you want to do that is you want to raise the pitcher up just a tiny bit so that the tip of that steam wand is submerged underneath the milk once again, while making sure that you are not disrupting the vortex that you've created by being on one side. If you move around a lot, that vortex is going to start doing really funny things. It might even flow over the edge of your pitcher, which is not ideal. Again, we want clean, consistent. So it's a very gentle movement. It's just this. You just tilt up and stop integrating air. The least amount you can move, the better. We just want a consistent vortex to distribute bubbles. We want to get those bubbles in a timely manner, in a very tight, delicate manner so that they are already tiny and they break up even tinier and create beautiful mouthfeel microfoam. Then finally, the last step is just waiting until it gets to the right temperature. The right temperature, if it's hot for more than a couple seconds on your hand, you've probably made it to the right temperature. Turn it off. Anything past 150 and you start to denature those proteins that we talked about earlier. And so they'll start to separate from the air, and then your milk will just fall apart and you won't be able to steam with it. It'll also start to destroy some of the sugars in your milk and make your milk taste worse. So don't go too hot. Once you reach the point where you're at the right heat, you can turn it off, pull it off the steam wand, wipe the steam wand, and then again, purge sandwich, purge it just a little bit, and that's it. That's all it is. It's really that simple. You just have to keep in mind a couple things. Gentle spurts of air, multiple spurts of air, consistent vortex, don't move around too much. And that's it. Oh, and don't overheat your milk. Yeah, it goes without saying. Right, so let's take it one more time. We're gonna go together. We're gonna go to the steam wand and we're gonna start right now. Purge. Pull out the steam wand. Place your pitcher underneath the steam wand. Lean towards one side, but don't touch the wall in between the middle and the wall of the pitcher. Turn that thing on. Sooner is better with injecting air. Remember, we want gentle, light chirps. Keep adding air until you've either reached the desired volume for your drink, or the pitcher is at 100 degrees, or the temperature of your hand, and then tilt it slightly to submerge that steam wand once again. Keep steaming until you reach the temp you like. Turn off the machine, pull off the pitcher, go ahead and wipe, and then again, purge sandwich, and that's it. But another important thing to remember after you've steamed your milk, and something I see a lot, is that people will take their milk and they will set it down and they will let it sit. You have worked so hard, you've made this beautiful milk, it's got delicate microfoam, and that foam is just gonna rise to the top if you let it sit. So what you wanna do is you wanna take that milk in your pitcher and you wanna keep that thing moving. And when I say moving, I mean moving. Okay, so that is it for me. Thanks again for coming by this week, guys. I hope this was informative, but the real fun starts after this video, because now that you have a prerequisite, you know how to steam milk, well, now we can actually start doing some fun latte art. This is a latte art channel and we haven't poured a single drink on this channel, which is a shame. But next video is gonna be focusing more on latte art, so I'm really excited to share that with you guys. If you liked this, please like, subscribe, maybe hit the notification icon. That really sincerely helps me out. And, you know, as always, have a good one.